So, Tom, I'm really excited about this next bit. We've kind of looked at some growth ladders, we've looked at proxies and signal strength, and one of our core thinking routines that we both absolutely love and use it in all different ways, which you're going to explore in a moment, is that idea of hexagonal thinking. So, do you want to take us through some of the brilliant uses of that?
Absolutely. So hexagonal thinking is one of our core routines because of the connections we can immediately make. And hopefully you're picking up those keywords are obviously refer us directly into the relational level of understanding. And so in many ways, when you're doing hexagonal thinking, you're tipping everything towards that deeper level of understanding straight away. And so, well, one of the things that you were seeing from the videos is the idea of brains on the table. And so that was easily kind of done with some small pieces of paper and little pieces of card. Hexagonal thinking would be in that same boat where we're using small hexagons that can be connected in many different ways. And on those hexagons are individual ideas or elements of a particular conceptual understanding. And so we can represent that and we've used hexagonal thinking in lots and lots of different ways and in different contexts. And one of the best ways we can actually help you understand it is just to show you some examples. And so what we have here on the left-hand side is a group of teachers exploring some of their big goals as a particular team. So it's not just a student kind of activity or a thinking routine, it's for all of us to use. On the right-hand side, this is an outcome of working with some teachers and some school leaders in the design of their new learning environments and new learning spaces. And so it was part of an architectural process, and they were answering the question what they value the most about great learning. And you can note here, so these are completed or more finished maps, and so they are through the kind of process of developing and thinking together, they would have been moving the hexagons around just like those students were in the video that you've seen. They would have moved them around, they would have been doing lots of discussion and talk, and then these maps are kind of like the final outcome. They decided to put them, set them down, to glue them on in the left one or to create a digital copy on the right. They come in lots of different shapes and sizes, and one of the powerful aspects of hexagonal thinking is that you can start with the same shape, you can start with the same ideas, but you're always likely to generate some thinking that represents your learning. And so that's a crucial part of this, is that you could set this up in many different ways with your students in your classroom, and they're likely to come up with something that's just for them in terms of the way that those ideas connect together. You can see here, there's some examples where we've had Post-it notes out, to organize and to label different aspects. We've combined it with all sorts of other things. That idea of using loose parts is a really important part of this technique. So thinking is happening, we're moving stuff around, and I'd like to really pay attention to the talk that's going on here, because these images represent maybe an outcome, maybe a finished sort of process, if you like, the kind of outcome of that process, but there's all sorts of other signals that we can pay attention to. So let's just use our language for a second. If we look at these maps, they are one signal, or they're one proxy of understanding, but whilst they were being created, there were other things that we could have paid attention to. So the talk that was going on, the changes that were being made, the answering of questions and things that were being used during that discussion. And it's not just, you would have noticed the example so far, written words, and we don't just have to use those. And so we could use it in lots of different ways. And I particularly like an image-only use of hexagonal thinking. And here's a couple. We've got animal habitats on a range of hexagons. And you can imagine this on a tabletop task for some early years students. And all you're doing is inviting some talk, inviting some discussion, inviting some explanation of what they can see. They might pick up the little hexagon there with the woodland and the forest space. They might talk about something that they've experienced. And so that gives you a really clear sense of their understanding about, habitats as a starting point. So getting students to talk straight away, using these as little artifacts of talk, is a really powerful way to use hexagonal thinking. Another example is some of that plate tectonics work that Chris had already started with his concept map earlier on in the course. Well, you could use illustrations and diagrams and images on maps, on hexagons, just for them to be able to, your students to be able to connect and link together, maybe to use as a starting point for some discussion. There's so many different ways that we like to use hexagonal thinking. And this is, again, one of the benefits of this particular routine, and why it works for us as a core routine, is that it's just simply hexagons, and they can, it's easy to resource, it's easy to build, it's easy to make it your own, it's easy to differentiate it for the students that you're working with, whether that's no language or whether that's specific keywords. You can imagine that these might have on the other side the kind of key language, like a label, and so they could have different versions where they have to flip them over, or you might bring in a plate tectonics key vocabulary set that they have to connect back into this. There are so many different ways that you could use hexagonal thinking, and so we like to use it because it shows that very, very clear signal that these ideas are connected, and then we encourage the talk that comes around that. Chris, in the next example, we've got another maths task. You're going to challenge my maths brain again, aren't you? We've done parabola and drawing graphs. This one's about pizza, though, isn't it?
It is about pizza, my second favorite topic. And I think one of the things is, since we've been using hexagons for years and years, Tom, and we were using a lot of paper-based hexagons, and we invested in pre-cut hexagons. I know we both invested in hexagon like paper cutters. Mine was not very good. I think it was too small. I didn't make them big enough. But we've done that. But the digital actually offers us some real opportunities to play with this shape as well, and to kind of really get kids to interact with thinking. So this up here there is a question, and it's around Chris and Tom. That's you and me, my friend. We're having a pizza party. And I've got a bunch of information on the screen here. And so what we're asking students to do is to look at this information and answer a simple question. Should Chris and Tom buy one 24-inch pizza, or should they buy two 12-inch pizzas? And that's it. So it's a very open-ended question, and there are lots of possible answers. And the really nice thing about the digital is that if you want to actually then start moving these hexagons, which we can if you do it in like Google Slides, or you do it on a Miro board, or even you could do it without the hexagon shape, I think, though, but on a Padlet. But you can, the idea of being able to move these shapes around. And so as we move them around, we can put them into groups. So we're starting at this kind of pre-structural to unistructural level. I think on the next slide, Tom, we've got some pictures there with just a bit of color in them. So we start to group them, and we said, well, on the kind of yellow hexagons here, it's all kind of information and some kind of opinions about, Chris loves a bargain and margarita. Frank's pizza dough's delicious. Tom wants to buy two 12-inch pizzas. Chris and Tom are going to have two friends over for a party. I mean, that's two pizzas for four of us. That's excellent. We might have, like, on the orange group here, where we've got, this is how much money we've got to spend. So we've got $26. Frank's 12-inch margarita costs $13, and Frank's 24-inch margarita costs $26. So you're like, okay, well, it costs the same to get two 12 inches and one 24-inch. So maybe we can discount that. You'll see on the right-hand side, we've started to discount things like pizza is the Italian word for pie. Like, that's interesting information, but it's certainly additional to what we are looking for. And did you know that the margarita pizza was invented on the 11th of June, 1889?
Amazing.
What you found is, and the students can just use a paint tool to fill in these different colors. And what they found that is the green color there, they've actually got some mathematical equations. So you're like, okay, well, this is interesting. Maybe this is actually not an opinion question, but more of a maths question. And so what we can do is we can then look at those connections, and we know that the 26 to 12 inches or 124 is the same. We've got the same amount of money. So we know that Chris loves a bargain. So is there something about the area of these pizzas that might be worth looking into? And suddenly when we start to do the maths on the next visualization, we're like, okay, let's do this maths. The smaller pizza of 12 inches would give you 113-inch area. But if I've got two of those pizzas, that's 226 inches. So just to repeat that, if I buy two 12-inch pizzas, I'm going to get 226 inches, 0.19, of pizza. That's a lot of pizza. But is it, Tom? Because in fact, if I buy one 24-inch, which you assume is just two 12-inch pizzas together, right? You assume that. I actually get 452 square inches of pizza.
Wow.
And that's because of the area of a circle is A equals pi r squared. So just to kind of visualize that, is like, here's my giant 24-inch pizza. So that has, if I half that diameter, it's 12 inches, and I get even two of those, I've still got all of that extra pizza happening. So just you're starting out from a hexagonal activity in a digital format to be able to color the hexagons, to be able to move them and group them and do all of that beautiful stuff we were talking about, which really reflects that that kind of solo language. And one of the things I love doing is if you can get kids to screen record themselves manipulating the hexagons. That actually gives you a whole story, a really interesting narrative, very much in the way that we filmed those students doing the maths task as well. So hopefully you see how beautiful a hexagon is, and that pizza is also making me a little bit hungry, Tom.
A little bit hungry. So hexagonal thinking. So we've got a great download, which is a starter PDF resource for you, which you can grab underneath this video. So take that, make sure that you can have a little explore of that. It's a great thinking routine. It's one that we vouch for the hexagon. We're advocates of the six-sidedness, the six-sided joy that it brings. It certainly pushes us towards that deeper level of understanding as it encourages our students to make connections. So we encourage you to take a look at that, explore this great thinking routine, and we'll see you in the next lesson as we start to wrap up this particular chapter.